Mr. Maryjean has suggested is very significant. We're spending $1.3 million of taxpayers' dollars to do a study on this. And we don't know what the study's going to come back with. I hope we don't. If we already did, we don't need to be doing it. And I have signed, I want to just make the record clear for myself. I'm, to use your phrase, Mr. Chairman, agnostic on the issue of consolidation. I'm not for it, and I'm not against it. I'm willing to be persuaded that it makes sense to do it, and I'm willing to be persuaded that it's a foolish idea. And I will be vastly influenced by the recommendation. I prefer the word wisdom as opposed to feasibility, because you can come up with about anything that's feasible, but telling me it's feasible doesn't tell me it's a wise, smart move. And that there's something, a path we ought to travel. And these guys at Deloitte are making good money off this, need to come back and, frankly, belly up to the bar and tell us what they think. And if they have trouble telling us what they think, we should pick the wrong firm. Surely to goodness they can tell us.
Governor Ashe, can I just qualify one thing, because that $1.3 million is a lot of money, and everybody should be clear what it's for. It's in staged payments. So
right.
In the first instance, yes, they will come back with a recommendation as to the wisdom of consolidation. If we decide to proceed with consolidation, they will then provide us with a blueprint for how we should consolidate these organizations.
Well,
and so we are permitted to stage the payments or cut those payments off if, for argument's sake, say we decide that consolidation is not a good idea. So we haven't committed $1.3 million to this.
And that's correct, and thank you for the clarification.
Would you read it back one more time, Paul?
But I would say we are spending $275,000 for the first phase 1 through 5 in the contract document.
That's correct.
And then if we decide it's a good idea to go forward, it would come out to $1.3 million at the end of the process.
Paul, would you read that back to me now?
Sure, as best I can, Mr. Chairman. It should say the agency has begun a feasibility study to explore, or a study to explore the feasibility of consolidating the 3 grantees pending due diligence into a single corporate structure, sharing a unified administrative and legal framework while retaining their journalistic missions. And then continuing on, the due diligence will include a preliminary look at the short and long-term financial ramifications and other benefits and costs of consolidation.
Yeah, since feasibility is now in there twice, if you'll take feasibility out from in front of the word study, so that the agency has begun a study, blah, 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 the feasibility. I would take feasibility, since it's a nice, complex word, is better. We will use our wisdom, but they will study the feasibility.
That's right.
And I would like to propose that amendment be made. Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. All right, as amended. Jeff Trimble.
We wanted to make just a further clarification. Maryjean could probably say it more clearly than I, about the contract and what it's for.
Yeah.
The $1.3 million figure for a contract would be the overall total amount for advice on helping implement your strategic plan.
Right.
It's not envisioned that consulting is confined only to the issue of grantee merger, and as
Correct.
Governor Lynton correctly said, the upfront figure now is to begin the process of the grantee merger study. But the contract is broader in scope than just the issue of grantee merger.
Thank you. Good point.
Mr. Chairman, since that's been brought up, I think, why don't we just put it out here? I've got the contract in front of me. It's $275,000 for items 1 through 5.
Correct.
And that'll end. And the due date that we hope for in prior discussions, just to be transparent, is we hope it's November 10th. I'm frankly, as an individual, skeptical that the equality study can be done in that brief time, but I'm happy to be proved incorrect in that skepticism. Then, assuming we go forward at $616,000 and change to go forward, there's $150,000 for travel, and there's another $258,000, I assume, to wind it up and do the post-implementation assistance that's on page 5 here of the contract. I should point out again for the record, and the board has moved to correct this by the adoption of Mr. Maryjean's amendment, that the contract itself in the plan of services really doesn't, it's an implementation plan. It's not a, is this wise or feasible plan, which that basically we've added on top of the contract, but it's not in the written document. Because Maryjean has told us if we redo it, it messes up the funding, or at least I think if I'm quoting you wrong, tell me. But
well, we had a nice long meeting this morning, all meeting with the consultants, who very much feel that that's part of the scope of work and very much understand that that's the way we're going to go, and let the record reflect that. And let Maryjean reflect that.
Yeah, I think that's correct. One thing, too, that is when you're looking at an implementation plan, one of the things you do look at is you're going to look at a cost-benefit analysis and those types of things in an implementation plan. And as we get that information, that would be the time when we start looking at those things that the board would be making this decision on whether that is an appropriate way to go. So part of that is, you know, the cost-benefit and the feasibility study is part of the implementation plan, because you can't implement what you can't do. So I think it is within scope.
And I think it's also important to note several governors, and they can all speak for themselves, but certainly Governor Mulhaupt and Governor Lynton referenced this morning that while cost-benefit ratio and cost savings, cost expenditures are important, there are other factors at play, such as hard to identify, hard to quantify, the special niche in the market, the culture that a particular entity may have that only MBN does well in Tunisia. I'm making generic examples. And that's going to be hard to figure out, especially in 3 weeks, but it may take longer than that. I think it ought to take the time necessary, but also keep the pressure on to have a product and not, at the end of my lifetime, but to do it in a reasonable time. And so I think that we're moving in the right direction, but, cost savings by itself is not, speaking only for me, is not sufficient to justify what will be a certain degree of agony and maybe hope and prosperity as well for consolidation. You also have to look at the history. Some of these language services are frankly are many years old. I'm referring to some at VOA, but also RFA may be the new kid on the block, but there's some others that have been around a while, and they developed areas that we should be cognizant of, not to say they couldn't be improved upon, modified, changed, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in a wild rush to consolidate, streamline, centralize, and have everything looking pretty on a chart.
Well, I think it's important to note, you've mentioned a couple of times about the time frame. And the consultant, I believe, did tell us that they felt they could aim for a month, but they would not hold to that. So if it took longer, that's how much longer it's going to take longer. And the board endorsed that idea. We want it done right. There is no artificial time frame, so I don't want to leave the impression that this has to be done in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, whatever. However long it takes to do it right is what we've asked them to do.
Do I